Okay guys, we're back now, and now we're on to part 3, and part 3 is going to be the preparation of your flight controller. Now let me explain to you a couple of things that I recommend you use for this. First thing you're going to want, make sure I got some in here, you're going to want a flux pen, okay? Second thing you're going to want to do is make sure that your soldering tip is cleaned. Mine needs to be cleaned just a little bit. So I will show you that what I do, and you can see it right here, it's nice and silver. It looks really good here. I use these, and we have these on our website. These are like, it's like a resin. And so you can soak that in there to clean the tip off of it, and then I use that copper brush that we offer on our website as well. Sorry, I just realized I made a little bit of a mess here, so let me clean that up real quick. You want to make sure you have a very clean soldering table, so let's just get this off of here, okay, and make sure that everything is good to go. Here's our XT30, here's our board, and here is our capacitor. Now, what we're going to do is, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our flux pen, and we're basically going to, as if we were coloring in all the copper areas here. Okay, all the pads, right? All the pads. Now I understand these screw holes, or these mounting holes are copper also. I'm not really worried about those. Let's make sure though that we do get the areas, and I will go underneath. I will do both sides where it exists because I want it to adhere to both sides if possible. So once we have covered this, and you can see, I mean, as long as you make sure you can see the liquid coming out here, you don't worry about putting on too much. Don't worry about having to be a clean freak about it. What we care about right now is just making sure the board is prepped properly. Now, the first thing that we want to do is just look at your board, okay? If you look at your board, you're going to see the following. And let me just get a little pointer here or something to show you. Shoot, I got to find my small screwdriver, which is somewhere around here. But I'll go with what I got right now. So let's... Oh, well, I'll take my tweezers at least. We'll use the tweezers, okay? So let me point out a few things, and I'm going to get my goggles here because I have a hard time seeing a lot of the small print. So here's what we're going to do. All right, I think that's good. All right. So first, I'm going to turn the board this way so I can read, okay? So here we go. Right here we have our ground, okay? And I'll see if I can zoom in for you guys. Let me see. I don't know if it's going to be too blurry or not. Let's just see. Put my glasses on, see if I can read the screen. It's a little blurry there, but I'll try to get it. So just follow along with the pads itself. So right here you can see, from right here you have ground, 4.5 volt, and S-bus. Now if you're running a FreeSky receiver or anything compatible like that, you will be using these three right here. This is TX6, this is RX6, this is TX1, RX1, TX2, RX2, and 3.3 volts, okay? So these are your UARTs, UART1, UART2, UART6. Let me turn this board this way, and then you're going to notice the following here. You have RX3 and TX3, so this is basically UART3 over here. You have your video in, this is where your camera video goes. You have your 5 volt, this is what's going to power your camera, and this is your ground. These three are going to be for camera. The TX3 is going to be for your smart audio. Excuse me. And then you have your video, you have your VTX, which will go to your VTX. This is your wire for VTX. You have 9 volt, which is going to go to your VTX, and you have ground, which is going to go to your VTX. Also here, you're going to have ground and 5 volt and LED and buzzer. So if you're running LEDs or buzzers, you're going to use these right here to power those up. Let's turn this around and then turn it again. What you're going to notice here, and I'm going to zoom out now just a little bit, and I could put this under the microscope later, but you'll also find the graphic on the website. And then here is your ground and your positive for your XT30, which means this needs to fit like this, all right? The other thing you want to make sure of is if you look at your capacitor, the capacitor is going to have a gold line that comes down at this thick gold line right here that is not present on the other side. That thick gold line right here has a negative sign right in it. This is your ground. Usually, it's safe to say, that the ground when you get a new capacitor will always be shorter than the positive. Okay, so if I grab this is a different model right here, and you can see the thick gold again, and you can see that the ground wire is shorter than the positive. If you wire these backwards, this will explode, and it makes a sound that will scare you, I promise. So please, be sure that your ground lines up with the ground here, and we're going to do that. So first thing is, with my, I have my soldering set to about 400 degrees Celsius because I like to solder quickly and I like this to melt quickly. I'm using 6337 solder. And what I'm going to do now, if you're going to put it hot like I am, do not sit on the board for too long. Try to keep your finger on there and see if you notice your fingers getting too hot. If your fingers are too hot if it's too hot for your fingers to put on here, then the board's too hot and you need to let it cool down. Here's what we're going to do. First thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and we're going to pre-solder the board, which means we're going to put a very thin film of solder on this board. Okay, just like that. All right. Okay. Now, when I do my soldering, I don't know how you guys want to do it, but when I do my soldering, I do it like this. I'll just put the solder on here, and as long as I put my flux, I will just come straight down, and all my pads get soldered. Okay, very easy to do. I'll try to zoom in just a little bit, maybe. All right, and then we'll do the same here. I am going to solder all the pads. Okay, there you go. So those are done, right? Now, the best way to solder, the best way to pre-tin these motors, the motor pads here, is like this. Go in, make sure your soldering tip is clean. Go in at an angle, meaning put your solder down and go in at an angle and just kind of let it sit there and then lift up. Okay, just like that. All right, not trying to put a ton on here, just trying to get it tinned. So put the solder in there like that. Bring your soldering iron and just kind of feed it in just a little bit. There you go. And you can see the board is not too hot. I'm good with it. Okay, I'm all good to go right there, so I can keep going. Okay, let me get another piece of solder. I end up with a lot of small pieces of solder left over, and I'll use those. I'll save them, use them for something small. But here we go. Let's do this one. Let's do this one. Okay, there we go. 1, 2, and then we have one more. Okay, and we're done. This is what your board should look like if you've tinned it properly. All right, now look at the bottom side. You're going to see some of the solder has come through, and we did put flux on the bottom here. Got a little bit of, there we go. Now, what you'll notice right here, though, is that there's nothing, and here's why there's nothing that's come through. I didn't put a lot. Plus, once I put the XT60s on there, or the XT30 cable, that's going to push through, and it's going to kind of cover this up a little bit. All right. With that done, the next thing we're going to do, set your board aside, let it cool down. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to prep this cable. Even though the cable comes pre-tinned, I don't like it. All right, it's just the solder, that solder on there doesn't melt very easily. So I'm going to put some flux, use the flux pen, and I'm going to get on this. I'm going to take my soldering iron, I'm going to take my solder, and I'm just going to let it sit there a little bit and just let my solder soak all the way through. Don't press, just kind of hold it on there. It'll melt through on its own. Do the positive, do the ground, just let it sit there a second, and you'll feel it get really soft there. That means your solder's gone all the way through, okay? Now we've tinned this with our solder, which means it's going to melt very easily. At this point, you're going to take your board, and remember, you've got your symbols here. Wherever the USB is, that's going to be ground, and this is positive. So take the black wire. I'm going to use tweezers for this. Take the black wire, and you may want to find something actually to hold this down. So, I mean, I don't go with anything fancy. I'm just going to take like my wire cutters here, for example, and I'll usually let me put a rubber band on here just to keep these closed. So I'll do something like this, something simple, okay? Place that right on there because you don't want this thing chasing all over. Now I can get you a fancy board holder and all this stuff, but at the end of the day, it all accomplishes the same. So it's not about who's got the most money to win this game here, okay? So let me go ahead, and now I need to find where I just put. Where did I put them? Maybe I put them here. Yeah, my tweezers, sorry, I put them in the drawer by accident. Okay, now take the ground, pull the positive out of the way, take your ground, and set it on the ground tab right there, and just hold your soldering iron right there. Do not press, just let the weight of the soldering iron push that wire. As it heats up, it'll push through to the solder that you put on the board itself, and it'll slowly melt perfectly into that gap right there. And I will show you that that is what it looks like. See that? Now if you flip it over, you'll see how it starts to come through on this side, which is fine. There's no problem there. And that actually, the board still feels pretty good, so I think we're safe to go with the next one. So again, we're going to take the positive now, sit it over the positive, and just put the soldering iron on there. And just let it, with its own weight, just let it fall through. And there you go. I mean, it looks perfect. So now you have your ground. If you flip it over, you can see your positive and your ground. And you look on this side, you've got it. You're done. Ground and positive, and everything is soldered, and it's in there very tight. Okay? The next thing you're going to want to do here is we're going to go ahead and we're going to get our capacitor ready. All right. Now I can tell you with basically what the room that we have on this board, we can use this capacitor. I would say, hey Sam, yes. Can I get my ruler please? Yes. Okay, I'm going to give you guys a length to cut these down to so you can guesstimate. All right. But you've got plenty of room to put this on. So I would just say, I wouldn't want to leave it all the way out. That's just super long, okay? Thank you. So I would say, look, I take my millimeter ruler right here, and I'm going to say, I would say to cut them down to about, you could start with 15 millimeters, okay, which is going to be right here. So I'm going to go ahead and get my cutters, and I'm going to measure this to 15 millimeters, which is right there, okay? And you will cut these the same length. So once you cut one, all right, let's put that here for the trash. Now just cut the other one. Make sure to catch that wire so it doesn't go flying everywhere. And there you go. That's going to be a nice length, all right, to go ahead and put this on here. There should not be a problem at all with that. And so the only other thing is, now this is just kind of a, you can do as you wish. You just gotta, you want to make sure that I like to pre-tin my capacitors as well. So I'll do something like this here, okay? And then I will go ahead and I will come through. Let me move that out of the way. Let me move a couple of these things off my desk. Okay, there we go. I will come through. I'll put a little bit of solder right on the ends here, just like that. Okay, and then it's a very quick process to solder this on here. Just hold it on there until it blends with the ground cable, or the ground pad, I mean, just like that. Okay, and just let it just nicely blend. Okay, then you're going to do your positive the same way. Hold it down, let it blend nicely. Okay, and once it does like this, you're not done. That's just a layer of solder just to get it to hold. Now, come in with a little bit more and kind of lay it on there and make sure to keep this in place. See that? That's perfect right there. That's going to hold very nicely. Do the same on the ground. Just start it. And it's going to want to pop off there because it's getting hot, so it's melting. But just hold it in place and just make sure to cover it properly all the way around. Let me get that solder out of there. There we go. Now once it looks like it's covered evenly and smooth, excellent. So these are going to be very solid on here. Okay, that's an excellent way to do it. And you are now done prepping your flight controller. Okay, so this is what your flight controller prep should look like. Let me just clean this right here. I don't like to have any sharp points. There we go. Okay. So now your flight controller is done, guys. So now what we're going to do is we're going to come in next and we're going to pre-wire we're going to pre-solder the rest of the board with the pre-wiring of the VTX, of the camera, and we can even pre-wire the receiver. And I'm just going to pick one so that we can get started with this, okay? So I'll be back in just a little bit to do the part 4, which will be the pre-wiring now. The soldering is done, so now we'll do the pre-wiring. We'll be right back.